introduce us or something?
Oh, this is Tommy.
You know who this crazy person is, right? I certainly hope so by now. Alright, so I guess we're going to do Stephen King today. Okay.
Starting our first day of Halloween.
I'm excited. I love Stephen King.
We just love Halloween. We think spooky.
Yes, but I still love Stephen King more than Halloween. Because it's Stephen King. And we both own, like, a bunch of his books.
I don't have all of them even here yet.
Yeah, well, all of mine are at my mom's house, and I've got, like, 30.
We have a lot of double books.
Yeah. Life is like a wheel. Sooner or later, it always comes around to where you started again. I guess these are quotes by Stephen King. Only enemies speak the truth. Friends and lovers lie endlessly, caught in the web of duty. The trust of the innocent is the liar's most useful tool. Ooh. Monsters are real, and ghosts are real too. They live inside us, and sometimes they win. Wow.
It's some dark shit.
He's got a dark brain. Your turn.
Alright. I thought I would start our Scaroween with our fave author, Stephen King. Like we said before, the month which is our fave month, we are going to do a video every day. We are going to do arts and crafts for this time of year, authors, scary stories, and much, much more. Stay tuned. Like normal, like and subscribe. Leave ideas in the comments. Thank you for your support, and please share and shout out if you give a shout out. We will do the same. Thanks.
I get to talk about Stephen King. I'm so happy. Stephen Edwin King is an American author of horror, supernatural fiction, suspense, and fantasy novels. His books have sold more than 350 million copies, many of which have been adapted into feature films, miniseries, TV series, and comic books. King has published 61 novels, including 7 under the pen name Richard Bachman. Not a lot of people remember that. And 6 nonfiction books. He has written approximately 200 short stories, most of which have been published in book collections. Yeah, I actually, because I'm writing a book, I actually bought his book on writing. It's really interesting. He tells a lot about his life and how he writes. Come to find out I'm a lot like him.
King has received Bram Stoker Awards, World Fantasy Awards, and British Fantasy Society Awards. In 2003, the National Book Foundation awarded him the Medal of Distinguished Contribution to American Letters. He has also received awards for his contribution to literature for his entire, I don't know what that word is. Au revoir. Such as the World Fantasy Award, Life Achievement 2004, and the Grand Achievement Award from
Grand Master Award.
Grand Master Award from the Mystery Writers of America 2007. In 2015, King was awarded with National Medal of Arts from the United States National Endowment for the Arts of his contribution to literature. He has been described as the king of horror.
He is the king of horror. Stephen King was born September 21st, 1947 in Portland, Maine. His father, Donald Edwin King, was a merchant seaman. Interesting.
Donald was born under the surname Pollock, but as an adult used the surname King.
I like it better. Can you imagine Stephen Pollock? It just doesn't. It just doesn't quite, have a ring to it like Stephen King does. King's mother was Nellie Ruth. I never know. Is that Nay Pillsbury? Her maiden name is Pillsbury.
When Stephen King was 2 years old, his father left the family. King's mother raised Stephen and his older brother, David, by herself, sometimes under great financial strain. The family moved to Dave Pierre, Wisconsin, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Stratford, Connecticut,
When King was 11, his family returned to Durham, Maine, where his mother cared for her parents until their deaths. She then became a caregiver in a local residential facility for the mentally challenged.
That would have been a tough
Most
job.
of this stuff is in his book on writing, too.
King was raised Methodist but lost his belief in organized religion while in high school. While no longer religious, King chooses to believe in the existence of God.
As a child, King apparently witnessed one of his friends being struck and killed by a train. Oh, that's awful. Though he has no memory of the event, his family told him that after leaving home to play with the boy, King returned speechless and seemingly in shock. Only later did the family learn of the friend's death. Some commentators have suggested that this event may have psychologically inspired some of King's darker works, but King makes no mention of it in his memoir on writing, 2000.
That would be very traumatic.
There's a theory that he wrote, was it Stand By Me? Based
That
off of
makes
that,
sense.
but he doesn't remember the the thing, so
It's a good book and a good movie.
I think, in the back of his mind, maybe he remembers it and he just
It's so traumatic. It just
blocked it out.
a lot of people do that, especially as kids.
Can you imagine that? Watching your friend get killed by a train? That would be awful.
And Stand By Me, they almost died from a train, and the kid that they were searching for died from a train.
Right.
Okay, King related a detail in King related in detail his primary inspiration for writing horror fiction, his nonfiction Dennis Macabre, which I actually have that book somewhere, 1981, in a chapter titled "An Annoying Autobiographical
Pause.
Pause." King compares his uncle dowsing for water using the bough of an apple branch. I can't even talk. With the sudden realization of what he wanted to do for a living. That inspiration occurred while browsing through an attic with his elder brother when King uncovered a paperback version of an H.P. Lovecraft collection of short stories he remembers as the lurker in the shadows that had belonged to his father. King had told Barnes and Noble Studios during a 2009 interview, "I knew that I'd found home when I read the book."
I'm just trying to help you. King attended Durham Elementary School and graduated from Lisbon Falls High School in Lisbon Falls, Maine in 1966. Ooh, I wasn't even born yet.
I wasn't even thought of it.
My mom was 3.
He displayed an early interest in horror as an avid reader of EC's horror comics, including Tales from the Crypt. He later paid tribute to the comics in his screenplay for Creepshow. He began writing for fun while still in school, contributing articles to Days Rag, the newspaper his brother published with a mimeograph machine, and later began selling his friends stories based on movies he had seen, though when discovered by his teachers, he was forced to return the profits.
It's funny. King met his future wife, fellow student Tabitha Spruce, I like that last name, at the university's Vogler Library after one of Professor Hatlin's workshops. They wed on January 2nd, 1971. She too is a novelist and I never say this word right. What she said, activist. I like her work. It's not my favorite or anything, but she's good.
Okay, the couple own and divide their time between 3 houses. I wish I could do that. One in Bangor, Maine, one in Lovell, Maine, and for the winter, a waterfront mansion located of the Gulf of Mexico in Sarasota, Florida. Let's see here. The king has 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons, and 4 grandchildren.
Aww.
He's a grandpa.
The daughter Naomi is a Unitarian Universalist church minister in Plantation, Florida, with her lesbian partner, Reverend Dr. Thandika. I'm not sure I said that right.
I didn't know she was lesbian.
Till yesterday when you told me.
I know. Both of the King's sons are authors. Owen King published the first collection of stories, were all in this together, a novella and stories in 2005. Joseph Hillstorm King, who writes as Joe Hill, published a collection of short stories, 20th Century Ghosts, in 2005. His debut novel, Heart-Shaped Box, 2007, was obtained by Warner Brothers.
Optioned.
Oh.
They're both good. I think I prefer Owen over Joe, though.
I haven't really watched too many.
I've only read one book from each of them, but I think if I got into it a little more, I could be more descriptive, I guess, on what the differences are.
I know, Joe writes more like his dad's stuff.
Which is funny because Owen's stuff is, in my opinion, better. Maybe because it's so different. I don't know.
Maybe.
In the early 1970s, King developed a drinking problem which would plague him for more than a decade.
Soon after Carrie's release in 1974, King's mother died of uterine cancer. King has written of his severe drinking problem at this time, stating that he was drunk while delivering the eulogy at his mother's funeral.
King's addictions to alcohol and other drugs were so serious during the 1980s that, as he acknowledged in On Writing in 2000, he can barely remember writing Cujo. Wow, I forgot about that. Shortly after the novel's publication, King's family and friends staged an intervention, dumping on the rug in front of him evidence of his addiction taken from his office, including beer cans, cigarette butts, grams of cocaine, Xanax, Valium, NyQuil, dextromethorphan, cough medicine, and marijuana.
Ah, sounds like quite the party.
By himself, too.
Jesus, King. Don't
Son
do
of a
drugs,
bitch.
kids. Jeez.
And don't drink in excess, because that's just crazy.
As King related to in his memoir, he then sought help, quit all drugs, including alcohol, in the late 1980s, and has remained sober since. The first novel he wrote after becoming sober was Needful Things.
Good novel. Though he does still smoke.
Probably.
I would. It's cigarettes. It's not going to,
He probably smokes marijuana too. It's legal now in most states.
Well, I'm sure he probably does, and even if he got caught, it wouldn't matter. He could just pay the fine. On June 19th, 1999, at about 4:30 p.m., yeah, that was the whole point, King was walking on the shoulder of Main State Route 5 in Lavelle, Maine. Driver Brian Edwin Smith, they have the same middle name, distracted by an unrestrained dog moving in the back of his minivan, struck King, who landed in a depression in the ground about 14 feet from the pavement of Route 5. That is really far. 14 feet.
Or 4 meters for people that are not in the United States.
Oh, sorry. 4 meters.
According to Oxford County Sheriff Deputy Matt Baker, King was hit from behind, and some witnesses said the driver was not speeding, reckless, or drinking.
I heard that he was drunk. Or at least a little tipsy.
Something.
In his book on writing, King states he was heading north, walking against the traffic. Shortly before the accident took place, a woman in a car, also northbound, passed King first, and then the light blue Dodge van. The van was looping from one side of the road to the other, and the woman told her passenger she hoped that guy in the van doesn't hit him. And then he does.
Right. King was conscious enough to give the deputy phone numbers to contact his family, but was in considerable pain. He was transported to Northern Cumberland Hospital in Bridgeton, and then flown by air ambulance to Central Maine Medical Center in Lewiston.
His injuries? A collapsed right lung, Multiple fractures of his right leg, scalp lacerations, and a broken hip they kept him at CMMC until July 9th. His leg bones were so shattered that doctors initially considered amputating his leg, but stabilized the bones in his leg with an external fixator. Ooh.
That sounds so painful.
Every time I read that, it makes my legs hurt.
After 5 operations in 10 days and physical therapy, 5 operations in 10 days.
That's like one, take a break. One,
Right.
take a break. One, take a break. My God.
King resumed work on writing in July, though his hip was still shattered and he could sit for only about 40 minutes before the pain became unbearable.
King's lawyer and 2 others purchased Smith's van for $1,500, reportedly to prevent it from appearing on eBay. The van was later crushed at a junkyard, to King's disappointment, as he had fantasized about smashing it. I would have. I'd have been like, I'm buying this thing, and we're gonna go take baseball bats to it.
That's funny how you just want to beat
Don't
the crap
smash
out of
the shit out of it. I want to do that myself.
it.
I would have. I'd be miffed too if they squished it. I'd want to beat the shit out of it too.
It's like it's the band's fault.
Well,
It's not Christine.
yeah, I was gonna say it's Christine. It's just like Christine. How do you know? Good.
The first of his stories to be independently published was I Was a Teenage Grave Robber. I've never even read that one.
Really?
It was sterilized over 4...
Serialized.
Sterilized.
It was serialized.
Over
just
4
so you know.
issues, 3 published and 1 unpublished, of a fanzine comics review. In 1965, that story was published in the following year in a revised form as A Half World of Terror. And another fanzine, Stories of Suspense, edited by Mary Wolfman. As a teen, King also won a Scholastic Art and Writing Award.
From 1966, King studied at the University of Maine, graduating in 1970 with with a Bachelor's of Arts in English. That year, his daughter Naomi Rachel was born. He wrote a column, Steve King's Garbage Truck, for a student newspaper, the Maine campus, and participated in a writing workshop organized by Burton Hatlin. We heard about him earlier.
King held a variety of jobs to pay for his studies, including a janitor, gas pump attendant, and a worker at an industrial laundry.
King sold his first professional short story, The Glass Floor, to Startling Mystery Stories in 1967.
After graduating from the University of Maine, King earned a certificate to teach high school, but unable to find a teaching post immediately, initially supplemented his laboring wage by selling short stories to men's magazines, such as Cavalier. So is it horror magazines?
Yeah. He wrote some porn. People do it. Many of these early stories have been republished in the collection Night Shift. The short story The Raft was published in Atom, a men's magazine.
After being arrested for driving over a traffic cone, he was fined $250 and had no money to pay the petty larceny fine. However, payment arrived for the short story The Raft, then entitled The Float. Then King was able to pay the fine. Thank God.
Can you imagine him ending up in jail for that shit? Why were you in jail? I ran over a freaking traffic cone.
Who needs a ticket for $250 for running over a traffic cone?
Well, actually, it's more expensive if there was, like, road construction and he ran it over. It would be pretty expensive. In 1971, King was hired as a teacher at Hampton Academy in Hampton, Maine. He continued to contribute short stories to magazines and worked on ideas for novels.
In 1971, King's novel Carrie was accepted by publishing house Doubleday. Carrie was King's fourth novel, but it was the first to be published. It was written on a portable typewriter that belonged to his wife. The novel began as a short story intended for Cavalier magazine, but King tossed the first 3 pages of the work in the garbage can.
Oh, I read about this. Tabitha King fished. Let me try again. Tabitha King fished the pages out of the garbage can and encouraged him to finish the story, saying that she would help him with the female perspective. He followed her advice and expanded it into a novel. King said, I persisted because I was dry and had no better ideas. My considered opinion was that I had written the world's all-time loser. According to The Guardian, Carrie is the story of Carrie White, a high school student with latent and then, as the novel progresses, developing telekinetic powers. It's brutal in places, affecting in others. Carrie's relationship with her almost hysterically religious mother being a particularly damaged one, and gory, and gory in the even more. I don't know what that means. That sentence doesn't make sense to me.
It's a quote from him.
Oh, okay. Well.
When Carrie was chosen for publication, King's phone was out of service. Why is your phone making noise? Doubleday editor William Thompson, who would eventually become King's close friend, sent a telegram to King's house in late March or early April 1973, which read, Carrie officially a Doubleday book, 2,500 advance against royalties. Congrats, kid. The future lies ahead. Bill, according to King, he bought a new Ford Pinto with the money for the advance.
Stephen King drove a Pinto? I forgot about that. On May 13th, 1973, New American Library bought the paperback rights for $400,000, which in accordance with King's contract with Doubleday was split between them. Carrie set King's career in motion and became a significant novel in the horror genre. Are you kidding me?
He only got $200,000.
Huh?
He only got $200,000 because it was split between the two.
Still, that's pretty good money for a book. For a paperback option, that's pretty good money.
Yes. King's Salem Lot was published in 1971 and a 1987 issue of Highway
1975.
75. I can't read.
Salem's Lot was published in 1975, y'all.
In a 1987 issue of the Highway Patrolman magazine, he said, the story seems sort of down home to me. I have a special cold spot in my heart for it. After his mother's death, King and his family moved to Boulder, Colorado, where King wrote The Shining, published in 1977.
The family returned to Western Maine in 1975, where King completed his fourth novel, The Stand, published in 1978.
I really want to see that hotel, the Stanley Hotel that he stayed in.
At The Shining?
Yeah, because that's the one that inspired The Shining.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't sleep because things were happening.
Yeah.
Let's see here. In 1977, family with the addition of Owen Phillip, his third and last child, traveled briefly to England, returning to Maine that fall, where King began teaching creative writing in the University of Maine. Doesn't help that he new glasses.
Maybe you need to clean them. In 1982, King published Different Seasons, a collection of 4 novellas with a more serious, dramatic bent than the horror fiction for which King is famous. The collection is notable for having had 3 of its 4 novellas turned into Hollywood films. Stand By Me, son of a bitch, that movie is amazing.
It's actually The Body.
Was adapted from the novel The Body. The Shawshank Redemption, another really good one, in 1994, was adapted from the novella Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. And An Apt Pupil in 1998 was adapted from the novella of the same name. Also another good one. Book and movie.
In 1985, King wrote his first work of the comic book medium, writing a few pages of the benefit X-Men comic book, Heroes for Hope, starring the X-Men. The book whose profits were donated to assist with feminine relief,
Famine.
a famine relief in
Not
Africa
feminine relief.
was written by a number of different authors. Not primarily associated with the industry, such as Harlan Ellison.
Where am I?
The following year.
Here? Okay. The following year, King published It in 1986, which was the best-selling hardcover novel in the United States that year, and wrote the introduction to Batman number 400, an anniversary issue in which he expressed his preference for that character over Superman.
There.
Stop whining.
He misses his father.
Bear.
In the late 1970s, King began what became a series of interconnected stories about lone gunslinger Roland, who pursues the man in the black, an alternate reality universe that is a cross between J.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth and the Clint Eastwood and Sergio Leone in the Spaghetti. What?
Sergio.
This is Sergio Leone. In the Spaghetti Westerns. The first of the stories, The Dark Tower of the Gunslinger, was initially published in 5 installments. The magazine of fantasy and science fiction under the editorship of Edward L. Furman from 1977 to 1981. The Gunslinger was continued as an 8-book epic series called the Dark Tower series, whose books King wrote and published frequently over 4 decades.
In the late 1970s and early 1980s, King published a handful of short novels. Rage, son of a bitch, that's a good book. The Long Walk, which is, by the way, that's my favorite.
Which one?
The Long Walk. It's a short story, but it's amazing. If you haven't read The Long Walk, find it. It's so good. Road Work in 1981, The Running Man in 1982, and Thinner in 1984 under the pseudonym Richard Bachman.
Which I have over there.
Oh, Thinner, yeah.
The idea behind this was to test whether he could replace his success skin and allow his fears that his popularity was an accident. An alternate explanation was that publishing standards at the time allowed only a single book a year. He picked up the name from the hard rock band Bachman Turner Overdrive, of which he is a fan.
Richard Bachman was exposed as King's pseudonym by a persistent Washington, D.C. bookstore clerk, Steve Brown, who noticed similarities between the works and later located publisher's records at the Library of Congress that named King as the author of one of Bachman's novels. This led to a press release heralding Bachman's death, supposedly from cancer of the pseudonym. Yeah, that was a big thing back then. It was funny.
King dedicated his 1989 book, The Dark Half, about a pseudonym turning on a writer to the deceased Richard Bachman. And in 1996, when the Stephen King novel Desperation was released, the companion novel, the Regulators carried the Bachman byline.
The Dark Half is a really good book, by the way. I mean, really good. You should read it. You're mean. In 2006, during a press conference in London, King declared that he had discovered another Bachman novel titled Blaze. It was published on June 12, 2007. In fact, the original manuscript had been held at King's alma mater, the University of Maine in Orono, for many years and had been covered by numerous King experts. King rewrote the original 1973 manuscripts for its publication.
He discovered.
Oops!
King has used other pseudonyms. The short story The Fifth Quarter was published under the pseudonym John Swiffen the name of a character in the novel Carrie. By Cavalier in April 1972, the story was reprinted in King's collection Nightmares and Dreamscapes. In 1993, under his own name, in the introduction to Bachman novel, Blaise King claims, with tongue-in-cheek, that Bachman was the person using this Swithin pseudonym.
The children's book Charlie the Choo Choo from the World of Dark Tower was published in 2016 under the pseudonym Beryl Evans, who was portrayed by actress Allison Davies during a book signing at San Diego Comic-Con and illustrated by Ned Dameron. It is adapted from a fictional It is adapted from a fictional book central to the plot of King's previous novel, The Dark Tower 3, The Wastelands.
A kid's book, though.
Yeah, but it's like a horror book. It's like a kid's horror book. It's really funny, though. I like it. I need to get it.
In 2000, King published online a serialized horror novel. The Planet at the First Public presumed the King had abandoned the project because sales were unsuccessful. Oh, they're there. But King later stated that he had simply run out of stories. The unfinished epistolary novel is still available from King's official site, now free. Also in 2000, he wrote a digital novel, Riding the Bullet, and has said he sees ebooks becoming 50% of the market probably by 2013 and maybe by 2012. But he also warns, here's the thing, people are the new toys. Here's the thing, people tire of the new toys quickly. Unfortunately, they haven't.
No,
a lot of bookstores are going
but then
out of
there's
business.
people like us who still want to read books.
I like
so
the smell and
we're going to teach our kids to make sure that they read real books. Because it's just better. King wrote the first draft of the 2001 novel Dreamcatcher with a notebook and a Waterman fountain pen, which he called the world's finest word processor.
In August 2003, King began writing a column on pop culture appearing in Entertainment Weekly, usually every third week. The column called The Pop of King, a play on the nickname The King of Pop, commonly attributed to Michael Jackson.
That's funny. In 2006, King published an apocalyptic novel, Cell, another good one. The book features a sudden force in which every cell phone user turns into a mindless killer. King noted in the book introduction that he does not use cell phones.